Hello, everyone. This is Ben. I am joined by Adam,
Good morning.
and we are here to unpack the first reading assignment of the Four Agreements, the first book in the pilot program of the Black Wolf Book Club. So, if you were just tuning in and weren't aware, we kicked off our book club um, last week on September 4th, day after Labor Day. And Adam is heading it up and killing it. And he had selected Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements, a Toltec wisdom book. I always want to say Book of Wisdom. A Toltec wisdom book as our first book. And it's been pretty incredible. And so the way that Adam set it up was he divided the book up. It's basically divided by chapters. The first assignment is the introduction and chapter 1, which is what we will be discussing right now. And then it pretty much goes chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4 following that. And so we are going to talk about, briefly, we're going to try to keep this not short, but concise. So concise can still have some length to it. But we just wanted to touch base on the study guides that Adam had published that were kind of aimed at directing the reader through, I was about to say literature. That makes it sound really, really fancy.
Study guides in literature make it sound like
Yep.
an English class,
This
which
is
is
intense.
not what we want. All right, this is designed again. The questions are designed to be reflections, something you can talk about with a significant other, with a friend, with your children, whatever that may look like. And it's certainly not a literature class for sure.
Literature. The literature sounds so fancy. If I'm reading a book, I want it to sound as impressive
If you're
as
going to use
possible.
literature, you need to wear your fancy glasses then, and
That's
I can
fair.
wear mine too.
You know what's
So.
funny is last night Joel's leaving. So if you've never closed the gym with Joel, Joel forgets something every time he leaves, and so like he will leave last because he'll be like, oh, left my keys, left my. So I come back from dinner at like 8:15, and the front's all shut down. So I'm unlocking the door, thinking I'm walking to a dark gym, bright as day when I walk in,
Mm-hmm.
and Joel's just wandering around the middle anyway. So he's here late because he forgot something. As he's leaving, I'm talking about, hey, Adam and I are gonna sit down and talk about the first assignment, and he was like, y'all should wear glasses. So it's interesting that you bring that up,
Right.
because apparently Joel was thinking the exact same thing. So yeah, I mean the reflections, and I do think that for a lot of us who haven't, one part, this book club was partly motivated by the idea that I believe everyone is served well by reading.
Yep.
I think most people even want to read, but they don't necessarily know how to prioritize it. As with anything, like working out, for example, sometimes it's easy for us because we're in a gym environment all the time. But like if you work in an office and you go there 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever, it's not necessarily natural for you to work out, especially if you haven't moved in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might seem logical to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't work out? That's crazy. And that's, hey, you don't read books? That's weird. But if you haven't read a book since college or since that book that you managed to squeeze out 3 years ago before you had kids, then maybe it is hard to find 10 minutes a day. Or as with any, hey, it's not hard? Eating healthy. But it's really hard? Eating healthy. Like eating healthy is just sitting down, eating lean meat and vegetables with some fruit. That's
Yeah.
all it is. It's really hard to do.
Yeah. Any personal habit change is very hard, and the biggest thing that I came up against as I started reading more and interacting with others about it, people, it's how are you getting through this many books? How are you reading so much? Oh, I don't have time to read, and there was a point in my life where I didn't have time to read either, right? It's it's simple to just say like, oh, well, make it a priority, right? That's what everybody always says. Well, make
Right.
it a priority. Well, that doesn't help someone find the 5 to 10 minutes a day to start reading. So yeah, it is. Any personal habit change is difficult, and it is such a huge thing just to start to read. And so it's kudos, credit to all the members who join the book club and are in us for the first book. Hopefully they can continue to find that time throughout the course of their day, to set aside to read.
Absolutely. And I think that this book, I know I've been approached by many of our athletes who were excited not only to start. Before we started, they were very excited. I mean,
Yep.
we heard that every day. Someone's like, "Can't wait for the start! Can't wait for the start!" But now that we've started, we're a weekend and we're a little over a weekend, and I think someone approaches me every day and talks
Mhm.
about how they're, one, actually doing it, and two, that they're getting meaning from it.
Yep.
And I'm sure they're having
That's
conversations with
awesome.
you about that. And
Yep. Same here.
I mean, you know, it's not that far-fetched to think that if you give someone a good book and encourage them to sit down and read it, that they're going to get something from it. But like,
Mhm.
it's still kind of nice. Like, it's like the A team. Like, I love it when a plan comes together. Like,
Yeah.
we had a great plan, but like, until people actually execute on it and get something from it, because you know what I don't want is like, hey, I read the book. We joked about it the first time. Like, I read the book in 2 days. What'd you get from it? I don't know. I just read it.
Yeah.
You don't want that. I mean,
Mhm.
especially in this book, is so powerful. And as we're about to get into, like, and as you said, not a study guide, it's reflections. Because a study guide wouldn't serve it. A study guide wouldn't do it justice. Like, hey,
For sure.
and I mean, there's in these reflections, there are like study guide like questions, like define sin in chapter 1, which we'll talk about, define impeccable. So that is like a textbook kind of thing.
Yes.
But it actually gives you understanding, because in those definitions, you then have to reflect on like, oh, so yeah, I did write it down word for word. I like underlined it, and I took it and I transposed it onto my my reflection guide. But then as I'm writing it, the mistake would be to just be done there.
Yeah.
And like, what does that mean?
Well, yeah, to go from anywhere, right? Like you have to understand like where you are, and you have to like define the terms. And so a question like that serves to make sure that as you're reading it, like you know what sin is, like you know what impeccable. The first agreement is be impeccable with your word, and like how can you know what that means if like you don't understand impeccable in your definition, in Ruiz's definition?
Right.
So like yeah, you have to define terms in order to like understand where you are and then get to where you want to be.
Right. And this whole book, I mean, it's titled The Four Agreements. This whole book is about agreements that we've made unknowingly.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that when we define something, if we don't reread it or reflect on it, it may not line up with our current agreement of it. And so like sin, for example, is a really good one. And I'm sorry I'm pulling from chapter 1 already, but like just in the future, because what came to my mind was, okay, textbook. But actually, if we use this approach in our learning of actual like textbook type learning, like I'm thinking of like, and I'm sorry this is weird, but like Newton's laws of physics, like an object at rest wants to stay at rest. Well, I can read that, write that down, but then I can start to think about that and apply it to so many things, and it, one, reinforces my understanding of it, but two, it also allows me to apply new forces in my life, because I'm aware of what this seemingly simple definition that seemingly is limited to just physics. Oh wait, physics is life, and now I've unpacked it into such a larger fitting fashion, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, so since I keep talking about chapter 1, let's get to the intro. So the introduction, and I had said this during if you didn't listen to our first episode where we kind of talked about the launch of this book, I had said that the first few pages had maybe given me the idea that this was going to be a lot of fancy words and a lot of weird definitions, and the intro kind of started that way for me, but then once I reread it, and I had already read chapter 1 when I reread the intro, so I kind of trusted the source then.
Mm-hmm.
I think chapter 1 served as like, oh my gosh, this guy's he's hitting home with me. I can now go back and see what he was trying to convey, or what my impression of what he was trying to convey.
Yeah.
So I will say that if you've only read the intro, give it a reread in case you thought it was maybe a little too wordy for you. But we read the intro. The assignment was September 4th to September 6th. And then for our reflections, there were 3. And I told Adam I wanted to talk about one of them. And the reflections I wanted to speak on, I mean, the specific reflection was, how can our daily approach and actions change when we begin to see ourselves in everything? Where are our blocks to doing this? And we touched on this, and so I'd like to get your thoughts. But we basically touched on, like, this is empathy. And, and to quickly, because I don't think people know what empathy is. Empathy is not feeling sorry for somebody. That's sympathy. Like, the emotional pull to be like, oh my gosh, can't, like, grieving and things like that. Empathy is just like the ability to put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly.
And
understand their perspective is how I define it. Putting yourself in their shoes is a much better way of defining it.
Yeah. So what to you, and as you read it, and then as you also wrote that reflection down or that question down for the participants in this club, what were your thoughts on that? And maybe we unpack the first one first to see ourselves in everything. Because what are the blocks?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are not the blocks?
You're right. So first, seeing yourself in everything. Like there can be like a religious background to this too. I was raised Jewish and consider myself Jewish, and there's that religious element in Christianity as well about being made in God's image, and that we're all made in God's image. But even if you were not comfortable with that religious backing, like we're all humans, like there's that element of connection. And like you said, with empathy, it's being able to put yourself in someone's perspective and realize that we're not that different from each other. And when we see those connections between ourselves, between others, like all of a sudden it opens up this like accessibility of happiness and love. That if you read the Toltec right before the chapter, there's this great quote at the end of it, distinguished by the ready accessibility of happiness and love. And so I think that's what happens when we see ourselves in everything, is that we can tap into that happiness and love towards other humans and other people. All of a sudden you say hi to the person checking, the cashiers checking out whatever you're buying. Like you have a conversation, like you want to engage in others, like you genuinely listen to their perspective, like you're curious, like, and when that happens, like there's a wonderment of life that like unfolds as you begin to see yourselves and other people. There's the Brene Brown quote as well that can be applied here. People are hard to hate up close, move in. And when you move in to others because you see yourself in them, like then that human, that bond and connection strengthens. Blocks to doing this, like you mentioned, like what isn't a block? There are so many. Like one, I think we're often taught to like sit in judgment of others and distance ourselves from others and think that we're better than or less than someone else. And so if we think that we're better than or less than someone else, we're obviously not going to see ourselves in them. Or maybe it's something, maybe it's fear. It's fear, I think that plays a big role in this. It's fear that we're not that different from someone whose circumstances are perceived to be less than us. And so by fear of falling into that sort of circumstance, we distance ourselves from them, think that we're better than someone else, and that also serves as a block, to not seeing ourselves in everything and everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we also, there's so many different combinations of this, but like for me, I also will not be able to connect if I perceive that you perceive yourself to be better or worse or whatever, and if it doesn't line up with my perception of where we line up to each other. And so it comes down to like comparison's the thief of joy, and I think that for me personally, that's what's always stood in my way. And I've talked about with us as coaches, I can fail to empathize even with people close to me. Why would he choose to do that way? Why would she not be here at that whatever, And what you just said, the Brene Brown quote, like, I put this in the email the other day. I was like, hey, before class, I want to make sure I high five you, because if I don't high five you, I might hate you.
Yeah.
For no, like, I might have thought of something that you may or may not have done, or may not have thought, like, whatever. But who knows what's in my head right now about whatever. And so, but as soon as I like physically connect, and really once I talk, like once I get, I've never been able to. I have had coaches, and this is a shortcoming on my end, where I perceive them to be falling so short of the standard that I will no longer interact with them. And so then what do you think happens? They just fall shorter and shorter in my eyes. And they are, by the way, underperforming, but I am not helping in any way, because I am now judging, and we're going to talk a lot about judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But then as soon as I go talk to them, no matter how egregious their failure, they showed up 15 minutes late and didn't say sorry, they didn't control the class, they didn't take care of a new person, no matter how egregious, it's usually not malicious. They're not usually like, yeah, I got 15 minutes because I said to myself, yeah, Ben doesn't matter. I'll just show up when I want to show up.
For sure.
You know? And, like, you talk to them, and even if their excuse is crap, like, I didn't know how long traffic would take. That's not a great excuse in Houston. You know there's traffic, show up early. But, hey, guess what? I've been late.
Yeah.
I've been real late.
Exactly. We've all been late. Like, we've all been in that circumstance, and I know, like, it sucks sometimes, and we think that, like, you know, come on, like, you should know better, and maybe someone should, but, like, if we can honestly, like, see ourselves in that person, then we can get to that place of empathy with them.
It's like a 30-second conversation, like, hey, how you doing? Like, what's
Yeah.
up? And, like, get past the bullshit excuse and then just talk to them. And then something that's like, hey, man, you still messed up, but, like, I don't hate you. I was being a little – and maybe they don't even know. With me, unfortunately, it's on my face. I just got to – it's – I was not – maybe I think it's a blessing. I don't get to hide emotion.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm being irrationally angry, everybody's like, hey, Ben, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And, like, I for a long time I thought that was a curse. I was like, man, I wish I could hide my emotion, but I realized it forces me to address it. If I'm not empathizing, it's really easy to see.
Yeah.
And so now I have to be really aware, and that makes me have to empathize more. But it's crazy to me, like, I can disagree with someone, I can be frustrated with them, and in the moment I start speaking to them, the weight comes off my shoulder.
For sure.
Burden of judgment dissipates, and I'm I'm literally able to breathe. I think the blocks are. It's interesting that this question comes up in the intro because Ruiz actually goes into it in chapter 1. We need to be better than people. We need a ranking.
Yep.
I need to know if you're better or worse than me. If you're better than me, I need to know how to tear you down. And if you're worse than me, I need to know how to push you down. Like, make sure you know that I'm better than you.
For sure.
And so I think
fighting for attention, as he talks about, right?
At the beginning of chapter 1, like as soon as a baby's born, he's crying for attention, attention, attention.
Mm-hmm.
We will accept all agreements that allow us to get that attention.
Yep.
But in the blocks to empathizing, I think it's comparison, and we know that the quote compare. We've used it before in the podcast, and actually, you know, in the much talked about recently, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, they talked about comparison's a thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not the most powerful thing I've heard recently, like we were bred to compare. Like, we were brought up to compare. Are you doing better than that person in school? Or do you have a better grade point average than that person? Like, you got to be ranked. You know, in professions, like, are you doing better or worse? Like, as an athlete, the whiteboard. That's so dangerous about the whiteboard. Like, the whiteboard is so powerful because it's data tracking. And in an industry where so many fitness programs don't guarantee results, they just want you to continue to show up, because if they don't track your data, then you can't prove whether you're getting better or not. So therefore, you'll just keep paying. You know, we like the fact that we track your data, but what you're susceptible to is then walking up to the whiteboard every day and be like, well, if I don't beat Angie, then I'm not good enough, you know,
Right.
or if I don't beat Ben's mom, or if you know, and for me, I fall as a coach trying to get back into shape. I'm absolutely susceptible to it. You know, I'll be like, man, if I don't get above average on this, then I'm obviously failing, you know. And so now I didn't enjoy my workout. I didn't enjoy the experience, you know, and I don't enjoy school. I don't enjoy learning because I'm so focused on trying to be ranked higher than you. I don't enjoy my profession because I need to be a better coach, or I need to be a better owner, kind of thing. There's a gym that has more people in their picture. We need a picture with more people.
You always lose when you compare yourself to others. And, you know, comparison is the thief of joy. Another quote that speaks to that is from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. For those of you who have read it, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And, like, the 12 Rules for Life is a long book. Chapter is chapter 4, where he talks about comparison and comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. And, like, that's just a great, you know, short way to summarize it. It's like, yeah, you get into that trap, and there's nothing to make yourself more miserable than saying, I don't have self-worth, I'm not worthy of love, I'm less than because I didn't beat so-and-so. And then you dove into the social media aspect of seeing a picture online. And, you know, we all know how social media can be curated. And one of the worst things we can do is compare ourselves online to the fake image that someone else puts out of themselves or of their circumstances.
Absolutely. And, I mean, we know I just bought a flip phone. and I'm trying to figure out my life with it, and not having social media, or like trying to not have a phone that gives me such easy access while still knowing you need it for the business. But like, I don't even think we're aware. I don't think you look at someone's photo and be like, what I am doing by looking at this photo, I am assessing everything in the photo to see how I would stack up. Could I take this same photo? Would I be able to be in the same location? Or would I have the same monetary means to have the object that the person's holding, whatever it is? I don't think we're conscious that that's what we're doing, but it's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
You look at it and you just end up feeling worse about yourself.
Absolutely.
And you might not say, like I'm actively comparing myself to this person, but you just look at it and you feel bad. And like that's shitty enough by itself.
Very, very much so. So, moving into chapter 1. Chapter 1 is titled "Domestication and the Dream of the Planet," and we're going to talk about three of the reflections that were posted by Adam. But that title alone, this chapter is the last one before each chapter. Basically, the 4 chapters after this are the 4 agreements. There's a chapter per agreement. This one's kind of setting us up to get into it. And Domestication, Dream of the Planet, one of the fascinating things about this book is how it really cuts to the core of you had nothing to do with your belief system. You aren't some unique, independent individual. Your parents told you what you think. Your teachers told you what to think. Your religious leaders told you what to think, and then eventually society, through social media, through media, originally media, and now social media, told you what to think. And as we've gotten older, maybe we've been able to begin to explore other options. But I think in the book, it says that faith is believing something wholeheartedly or unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
In the Bible, faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see, or certain of what you hope or sure of what you cannot see.
Okay.
And so that usually is a good thing. Anytime anybody talks about faith, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But like, if I have faith that white supremacy should reign, and I truly believe that, that's not a good thing.
No, not at all.
But if I was born into it, and I think that's what's crazy. Like, how far can this empathy go? But like, if I'm born into this home that, I mean, what was the Edward Norton movie where he was the white supremacist? It was such a good movie.
You're asking the wrong person.
It's such a powerful movie. I'll look it up once Adam starts talking, but it's such a good movie. But like, he was raised in it. He was raised in it. Doesn't make it right, and that's not any. There's no debate on right and wrong. Like, you don't get to hate someone. You don't get to take away the quality of life from someone. But if you're born into like white power through the guise of Christianity, then when you get to be 15 or 18 or 22, is it any wonder that you believe that? And how would you not be how could you be responsible for that?
Mm-hmm.
And so guess what? That's faith, though. He truly believes it unconditionally. Yeah. He has faith that it is correct. It is his guiding principle. And so then let's take it back a little bit. This domestication that we think of for animals, and Ruiz talks about that. Like, we domesticate our cats and our dogs to where, my dog right now, my 100-pound black wolf, is laying under Adam's feet on his side, like docile and calm. Like, he's not trying to go hunt or tear stuff up. Like, he doesn't pee in the house or pee in the gym. He doesn't chew on the furniture. Like, he's well behaved. He waits for treats. He waits for food. Like, he's domesticated. He has no characteristics that he would exhibit if he were in the wild. And we think of that as animals, but we're domesticated, and we're conditioned from birth to act a certain way. And again, that is what this entire book gets at, is where would we be well served to question that and to maybe redevelop our thought processes on those subjects. And so that was the first thing that jumped out at me, because that's kind of what he gets at.
Yeah, I mean, and like, that's so well put. Is like, like, here's how we have been domesticated, like, and we have, and then like, how do we, the other tagline for the book is a practical guide to personal freedom, in addition to it being a Toltec book of wisdom, as you would like to say. But like, that personal freedom, like, how do we find and unpack, where our domestication lies and how we can begin to have some freedom outside of that.
So, just as I would be able to tell you if my dog was a good dog based on if he like followed the rules of domestication.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we fail to forgive ourselves for not living up to the images of perfection in our minds? To me, I wanna take this a step down a little bit because images of perfection, I think that's really important. If you don't weigh like, and especially 10 years ago, hey, if I'm a woman and I don't weigh 100 pounds, I'm fat.
Yeah.
But you're 5'10", still fat. I should still weigh 100 pounds
Yeah.
because that's what people told me I should be. That's what the images told me I should be. It has to be that way. The only women that get exhibited as being ideal weigh 100 pounds. And so, therefore, no matter what, no matter if I'm a weightlifter, no matter if I am just naturally like broad shouldered, like no matter what, I'm supposed to weigh 100 pounds. And we saw the eating disorders, we saw all the mental health issues arise from it, and they still exist, absolutely still exist. In our communities, we're so lucky because we're able to empower women to move past that. But I think it also goes into how do we fall short of the rules of domestication? How do we fall short of maybe what our parents had us believe or what our, again, teachers, religious leaders said was the only way, was the right way? So in your opinion, how do we fail to forgive ourselves for not living up to the image of perfection in our minds? And then how do these forms of punishment manifest? And how do they affect our interactions with others?
Yeah. So you touched on it. We create these images of perfection, or they have been created for us in a variety of different areas.
American History X. Sorry, I didn't look it up. It just hit me. Sorry.
Okay.
Watch American History X. It's an incredible movie. And for those who are like, are you about to make us sympathize with white supremacy? Not at all. It's actually a story of growth from that perspective, a move away, admitting wrong, and seeing the wrong in their ways. Sorry, American History X, great movie. It's a really, really good movie. And Edward Norton is jacked. So, like, that's weird because Edward Norton's a meek kind of skinny dude.
I have trouble like understanding him as an actor because like you see him jacked in one role and then like in other roles he's just completely different. But
all right, sorry, going back.
Yeah, no, I mean that's like a great exercise in like psychology right there. How you couldn't remember it when you were really trying to think about it, but as soon as the question was turned over, then it was able to pop into your mind.
There you go.
Back to images like of perfection, and so I'll talk about my personal experience here for a little bit, and maybe some of you can relate. In college basketball, like as someone who's trying to come up and pursue like a highly selective field, like there's an image for what a college basketball coach is supposed to look like: clean cut, like clean shaven, typically not a white guy who's 5'10". Like you're supposed to act demonstrative on the sideline and stomp your foot and like think about what you see on TV. I mean, and this is even like when you're applying for colleges, like back in high school, like you create an image of like what a UT student looks like, what a Rice student looks like, what a Harvard or Ivy League student looks like, and you try to make yourself into that person, because then you think that those institutions or those things or those what you've created as perfection like will accept you, and like that's who you have to be, and inevitably like you will come up short of what that perfection is, or when you get to what that mark is, like I would argue that you're probably not the happiest that you could be, because you've had to sacrifice parts of yourself in order to get there. And it was funny. I was clean shaven in college basketball for 10 years because I had a boss when I first started out who told me that I had to shave every day. And as soon as I decided that I was going to make the transition out of college basketball, I grew out my beard and kept my beard. And so that's like one way about how like as soon as that image changes or that what we define perfection as changes, like yes, it's a very surface level like way that it changed within me, but like it's allowing yourself to express who you are. But back to how those forms of self-punishment manifest, when we continuously fail to live up to what we've perceived as perfection, like obviously it's very hard to like then love ourselves or be loving towards ourselves. And what does it mean to like be loving towards yourself? Well, it means like getting 8 hours of sleep and like going to bed on time because like you feel that you deserve 8 hours of sleep so that you can be your best. It means like eating really healthy so you can give to yourself rather than and so that you can like operate at your best the next day rather than eating junk because like it makes you feel good to cover up the deficiencies that you've created by failing to live up to perfection. And you know, like it means having healthy relationships with others and with the things in your life. And like addictive relationships are born out of fear and out of self-loathing and out of like lack of self-love. And you know, I can speak from experience a little bit just on having poor relationships with food and alcohol and different things in my life previously, but it manifests itself like in those addictions and looking to other things for comfort, because like we can't find comfort in ourselves. And so that's one way that those forms of self-punishment manifest. How do they affect our interactions with others when we're not, like, it's really hard to love others when we don't love ourselves. And it's really hard to express happiness and love towards others when we don't love ourselves. And so again, you know, back to the example of, you know, being nice to a cashier, it's like really hard to just like smile and ask someone else how they're doing, if like we think that we're constantly failing to live up to perfection. You know, I would imagine you might snap at your wife or your significant or your husband or significant other a little bit more. You know, maybe you cut someone off on the road. You know, it comes up in all these little things that just generally fall under like acts of love and kindness and happiness and generosity. Our life in that, in our lives in all of those aspects unfold when we like start to dismantle those images of perfection, or when we can begin to forgive ourselves, like for quote unquote like not living up to those images of perfection. What do you think about those questions, Ben?
I think that you really hit on something that actually this audience would be able to see in me. Mainly, I've talked about it, but I think it was apparent. So last year, as we've discussed, I started going to therapy back in March of 2017 because in December of 2016 I was like in a very, very dark place, and I was failing at everything I was doing. The gym wasn't meeting my expectations, which is probably something else we should touch on.
Yeah.
And therefore, I was telling myself that, because I mean, expectations are my images of perfection.
Right.
And so, if my expectation is that we're going to be at 150 athletes, and we're at 90, man, I'm 60 short. You know, I'm only 3/5 of the way there. That's not great. I'm over halfway, but like again, like that's not.
I'm going to interrupt real quick because I think what you said is extremely important. Like expectations that we have in our lives, like that's another image of perfection, and like that's so important to understand here. So like I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's not even an image of perfection. It's just an expectation that we have about a situation.
Right. Well, and I think because I think the term image of perfection, especially in society where we don't normally dig deeper. I think sometimes you'll read that term and just be like, okay, I'm thinking Instagram. I'm thinking of a little image or an image I have in my mind of like what the office is going to look like that I'm going to get when I have the job, or like whatever. And then perfection can also be like, I don't need to be perfect. So well, then let's tone it down. What's your expectation? Because we all have that, and that's been a stumbling block for all of us.
Yep.
And it can be anything. And for me, it was the success of the business. And last year, things were not going well in terms of strictly financially for the business. People are still changing their lives.
Yep.
People are still losing weight. People are still coming off medication. People are still getting stronger. People are still building confidence. I didn't see any of that, because my expectation was purely financial. And it wasn't financial like in an entirely greedy sense. It was financial that I needed to be able to live comfortably. Like I needed to be able to pay my rent, and I got evicted, which I eventually was evicted from my apartment during this time period. I got evicted in 2017. I received eviction letters, and I actually have all of them at my desk 4 months in a row, and I was able to pay it off before the eviction actually occurred. And then finally in November, I couldn't make it. And so that's when I moved into the gym, and I've lived here ever since. And the reason I bring all this up is that I was in a relationship during that time. And we are responsible, and we should touch on the victim part, the judge and the victim as this book discusses.
Yep.
Is that chapter 1 or chapter 2? I think it's chapter 1.
I believe it's chapter 1.
The judge and the victim, because I think that's so powerful. And yeah, I actually think we had skipped down. I think you actually have it in this.
Yes, it is chapter 1.
I just skipped it on this little the reflection guide, but the chapter does touch on the judge and the victim, and we're both. We are the judge and we are the victim, and the judge is who says you're not good enough, and then the victim is who receives that I am not good enough. And other people judge us for sure, and we judge others, and therefore we can be a victim as a result of other people and whatever. But the point here is, I judged myself to be falling short. I was not meeting my image of perfection, which was my expectation. I also was in a relationship where I was told I was falling short quite often. That relationship ended when I got evicted. And it wasn't like, oh, you can't pay your rent, I'm not going to be with you anymore. But like, it also wasn't that. Like, It kind of was that. And what happened, what's funny is, and I'll say her name, Anna Sanchez is a client of ours. And as soon as this happened, in December, she sees me in the gym and she goes, "You're so happy now. I like this Ben." And it was because I had been released of my expectation. And I was free now. And we're going to talk about freedom in a second. But I no longer had this irrational expectation. I also no longer was judging myself based on that expectation. I was able to breathe. Again, weight dissipate. Like, it came off my chest. Like, it just, like, air came back into my lungs. The power was returned to me, as we're going to talk about the agreements. And Anna recognized that. And then other people start saying things. And then you know what happens in the gym? The gym gets better. And we didn't grow at first. And I still struggle with some team members. But the energy got better, and people were happy and excited to be here. And suddenly, like, it was palpable. You could literally taste it. You'd walk in and be like, whoa, something's taking place here. Yeah. And again, we ran the same programming last year. We coached the same last year. But just like,
so I would argue that you probably didn't coach the same
okay, that's
last
great.
year.
So I would say we hit the same points.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's no Joel coached the same last year. I mean, other than the growth that he's seen himself, but like. Yeah. Because he wasn't a downer last year. But for me, I would never take the opportunity to invest in somebody the way I'm able to this year. I didn't take the extra moments. I would just be like, these are your points of performance, good or bad. Yeah. Fix them, don't fix them. Okay, moving on. Here's your workout, good or bad. Good, you can do it. Ready to go. Like, and on bad days, it was like, why are you disappointing me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, why is your back rounded right now? Like, how dare you round your back in front of me?
Right.
And it was because I was carrying this burden that I was placing on myself. And that, yes, my relationship, because I do think that we need to accept responsibility. We are responsible for judging ourselves. We are responsible for the expectations we set and that we fall short of. And it's our fault when we set those expectations. That's the whole thing here. But we also are responsible for the people we surround ourselves with and the expectations they place on us as well, because we are going to try to meet those expectations for the attention.
For sure.
I want the attention.
For sure.
Okay? And so when I get rid of the person that I am negatively, not their fault, my fault, I am putting myself in a negative state in order to hopefully someday achieve the attention that they want to give me if I meet these certain whatevers. Okay? When I get rid of that, suddenly I'm closer. I'm not being myself yet, but I'm closer to being true to myself. And now suddenly I'm happier. I can smile randomly now, which was not happening last year.
Right.
I can have enjoyable conversations that I don't have to like mentally prepare for. And I'm now able to influence people in a very positive way. And I'm sorry, is it a wonder that now we have a great team of coaches and we didn't have that same great team last year, that it never came together until I took care of myself? Until I start to prioritize myself and understand that if I don't fix me, that I can have no good influence on this world without a severe case of martyrdom, which is not how you should live, And so I, in my not forgiving myself for not getting to 150 as fast as we were supposed to, guess where we're getting to now? We're like damn near 150, I think. I mean, depending on how you do the math of fitness and stuff, like we're pretty much right where we need to be. And I haven't even thought about that, Yeah. So it's so fascinating how that all came together. And then the self-punishment was simply telling myself I didn't deserve for a new athlete to come in our doors. I didn't deserve for a coach that was good enough to come through our doors. We were always going to be the gym where nobody wanted to take advantage of their free week or no coaches wanted to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my punishment was. I told myself that every day. And I mean, that was just putting myself in like solitary confinement.
Yeah.
Because I could not be excited for my work because I didn't feel like anybody wanted to be a part of it. And I told myself, well, no shit. I don't deserve for people to want to be a part of this.
I think the random smile that you touched on earlier, like not being able to randomly smile, like that's also a form of self-punishment. And like I know I tend to have the resting scowl face at times, and some members have brought that up to me a little bit more recently. But when right around the time that I read this book, I found myself in an interaction with someone at the gym I was at previously, and I found myself just with like the biggest smile on my face, like for no reason.
Yep.
And you stepped away and you're like, man, like life is awesome. And you're like, I was smiling. Why was I smiling? Well, for no reason. And it's just, like being able to, like not being able to randomly smile, like that is also a form of self-punishment.
Okay, so that's great transition. So how do we get to the place where we can do that? And as you wrote, how do we develop self-love? And what does it look like to accept ourselves?
Yeah, it's and like that's such a loaded question, and like there's so much to unpack. Like, how do we develop self-love? What does it look like to accept ourselves? It's different for everybody. So that's the first thing, is that again we talk about expectations or images of perfection, and like self-love for me is not the same thing as what you would practice for self-love. For me, it looks like cooking breakfast every morning for myself, and like because I like love cooking and I love food, and you guys see the breakfast tacos that I put up on the Instagram stories, and like that is like they're delicious, but that's a form of like giving to myself, like it like getting enough sleep, like your mental thought, like the voice in your head and what you tell yourself, that's also a form of self-love. And I had this conversation with an athlete yesterday, is like when we tell ourselves that we're tired and we're not good enough and circumstances suck, versus like, hey, like you're awesome, you're doing great. Like that's why when Ben and I are coaching classes, that's why we go around and like tell you that you're awesome, because like you are, like you're showing up, like and that's half the battle most of the time. And we tend to not tell ourselves that we're awesome, and so like we try to reinforce that for you at times, because hopefully it's what you're saying to yourself as well. What does it look like to accept ourselves? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm still probably like, it's still something that we practice every day. Like, it's not a destination. I think we might have talked about it last time, like the finite game versus the infinite game. And all of this here is an infinite game. Like, it's continuous, like practice and tinkering and development. And it's like a long-term trajectory, like along a slow distant horizon that's like always moving. What does it look like to accept ourselves? It's like when you make a mistake, like being able to laugh at it. Like that's a big one for me as well. Like I'll go back to another example from like last winter. I got home from the gym and I was shaking up a protein shake in a shaker bottle. I didn't tighten the lid down.
Yep.
And of course, like protein powder shake goes everywhere. And as people who have known me before can attest, like if someone else would have done that to me, I for sure would have come down at them. If I had done that to myself, like the rest of my day would have been a disaster.
Absolutely.
Because I would have hated myself for doing that. And I laughed and I cleaned it up. And it actually happened 2 days ago. Colin Brumlow reminded it of me this morning. I picked up my water bottle. The cap wasn't tightened all the way, and like water spilled all over the place. And like we just laughed, and Cecilia helped clean it up, and was very appreciative of that. And we all laughed and had the great rest of your day. And Colin asked me, he's like, how was the rest of your day after that happened this morning? It was great, because I was able to like accept that like I'm a human and I make mistakes. And so I think like that's one of the ways in which it can manifest itself. How do you then respond? Like, how are you when you make a mistake?
So do you think, and I want to go back to how do we develop self-love, but real quick on this, because hardly a hardship, but when the things that have traditionally triggered us in the past occur, and we are able to now identify them and then not allow them to ruin our day. Mm-hmm. Because man, let's not just, you stub your toe.
Yeah, right.
You didn't sleep well last night. Okay, so you're a little bumpy. You know, when you're tired, you kind of bump into door frames a lot more, kind of thing. And like you're trying to make the best of your day. and you're walking through the office, or no, because you got to be barefoot. You're in your house, you're about to go to work or something. You clip the coffee table. You know, maybe you're stepping over the dog and like you stub your toe. There's a time where one, I'm gonna lose my shit in the moment, but also I am now going to drive angry to work. I'm going to take every change of lanes as if someone's cutting me off. I'm going to think the person at the coffee shop is taking too long or they're too pretentious or whatever. Now I'm going to be acutely aware of how expensive the coffee is, and then I'm going to get to work and my boss is a dick. Like, I'm just suddenly, I would have been set into a negative state for the day. And that sounds really petty, but guess what? I mean, first of all, I'll accept that. I was petty, incredibly. Still am, struggle with it. But do you think that when you are working on making a change like self-love, like trying to do a better job, do you think that life or God or whatever it may be will intentionally test you? And I just feel like I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in people I've worked with lives where we're making headway. So nutrition, we're doing a nutrition challenge right now. They crushed it week 1. So week 2 starts rolling. Week 2, like week 1 is pretty easy to power through stuff because you're excited to do it. I could make you eat we're going to do this all spinach diet. And you can make it a couple of days because you're like, yeah, man, I'm excited to do this challenge. Like, I don't know why I'm doing it, but I'm excited to do it. It's like you can get like 3 or 4 days in because like you won't question it. You're just like, we said we'd do it. Let's do it. Rah, rah, rah. Starting marathon training. You'll run the first few weeks. That doesn't matter. Will you run in month 3 before the marathon? Like, will you continue? So when someone's eating well, they have some momentum behind themselves. It always seems like before they really make the breakthrough where this is going to be sustainable, that's when it becomes like Taco Tuesday at the office. And then suddenly the husband randomly wants to be romantic with cake and wine at dinner. And he's never romantic. And now he chooses the time. And then suddenly the kids have this party that you have to go to. And it's going to be 17 hours long at Chuck E. Cheese. And the only food's going to be pizza. And like life suddenly lines you up against all this stuff. And you get really down about that. Like, man, I was working so hard. And before you even get into it, you're like, man, I'm not going to make it. But I've started to believe that life has a tendency, when you decide to make a change, it's going to test you. And it's going to continue to test you. But I really feel like since we're so aware of it, we're so hypersensitive in the moment because we're intentionally making the change in that moment, that it seems like it's like that last storm, like before we make the breakthrough. And I think like the shaker, like you're talking about, like stuff like that's going to happen. And one, the first step is identifying it. And I've always said, like, even if I can just identify that this is something, even if I still have a bad day after that, identifying that that's the thing. And then eventually I can identify in the moment and not let it affect me going forward. So, I mean, do you think there's any truth to that? I mean, obviously it's...
Yeah, so like that requires like an element of faith and spirituality, right? That like things happen for a reason. And for those of us who like have struggle like wrapping our heads around that, or maybe we're not religious, like, you know, the other way that you can frame it, I think that might be beneficial just in terms of understanding it in a different way. Is like you might be open to seeing the opportunity to being tested more because like this is something that you're working on. And like all of a sudden, like this opportunity is there, and previously it would have just been like a normal.
You don't see white minivans until you're shopping for a white minivan.
Exactly.
You're like, I never see this car on the road, and then suddenly you see that car on the road everywhere because you're open to seeing that car on the road.
Exactly. Personally, like I do, you know, again, I'm not religious, but I do feel that, you know, like we encounter tests and that things like I don't want to say things are meant to happen, but like you know, the like we are like the sum of our experiences in the past, and like we're like, you know, you work to get to where you're supposed to be, is how like I kind of phrase it. And you know, last year when I was making personal changes and I was eating better and working out, like all of a sudden like recruiting hit and I was going on the road, and it's like, all right, like I'm in the airport at 5 a.m. like, am I gonna get enough sleep? Like, am I gonna eat healthy when I'm in like in high school gyms until 9 o'clock at night? Like, what's gonna be open? What am I gonna eat for dinner? Like, am I gonna pack snacks? Like, am I gonna bring an RX bar and an Epic bar? And like, you know, previously that just would have been like, it's recruiting. Like, I'm gonna go eat shitty. And like now I looked at this like as an opportunity to like really demonstrate the things that I was working on. It was a challenge, right? And so like, you know, again, maybe we just become open to receiving those challenges that life throws at us, like when we work on making a change.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And so back to the how do we develop self-love? What do you think the role of, and I don't think he touched on this. He wants us to be aware of them, but the first step is identifying you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there would be benefit to, and it's honestly what's in this reflection guide, identifying what you struggle with?
Yeah.
Because when we try to take on change, if we don't know the problem we're trying to address or the agreement we're trying to confront, if we talk in the language of the book, the belief that we shouldn't have, if we don't actually say it or state it explicitly, don't we kind of put ourselves at a disadvantage in pursuing the solution if we're not explicit or specific in what the struggle is that we have?
Absolutely. Like, you have to know what struggle you have in order to work on it. And you can kind of work on things without knowing exactly what it is, but earlier we talked about defining terms. You have to define terms. You have to understand where you are in order to get to where you're supposed to be. If you're looking at a map, right, and you want to be over, you want to be in Austin, how do you get there if you don't know that you're in Houston and that you need to take 290 or whatever it
Right.
is, over to Austin? So you need to know where you are, and you need to know have a general idea. It doesn't have to be exactly I'm at 1624 airline. It can be all right, I am generally here, and the route to get to where I want to be is generally this direction. But you talked about developing self-love earlier, right? And how do we develop it? Yeah, you have to understand where you are first in order to know
For example,
what
last
self-love
year.
looks
Okay,
like.
last year I could have told you I was unhappy in the moment.
Yeah.
Hey man, I'm depressed. I started there. I had identified I was depressed,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean I could have left it there.
Yeah.
I'm hey Adam, I'm depressed. I'm having a real hard time believing in myself. I'm having a real hard time believing this is worth it. I'm having a real hard time believing that I haven't wasted my time over the last 8 years. And I could have said all that, but if I didn't dig deeper into why I felt that way,
Yeah.
and I could have worked on being happier. I could have worked on finding the good, and I could have worked on connecting with people, and I think it would have lifted me up a bit. But I think the reason that I was able to rise well above it was because time was spent digging into the root cause, what the specific belief was, what the specific expectation was,
What your agreements were?
what the specific agreements were that were leading me to lead such a underwhelming life, and have such a pathetic view of myself. And I don't know that. I think sometimes we fail to do what you just said. We fail to state exactly where we are.
Yeah.
And I think it's also because we're scared to.
It's very painful to do that.
Yeah.
I have, it's Houston, it's hot. I work out with my shirt off. Those of you might have noticed I have a tattoo on my body that says pain plus reflection equals progress. I got that from Ray Dalio, who's the founder and CEO of Bridgewater, which is the largest hedge fund in the history of the world.
Do you want to add principles to our book club?
I mean, I would love it if we could, but I'm not sure principles that we're going to get through that one. But it's a very long book for those of you who aren't.
Maybe we'll do an audio book club.
Yeah. I mean, so pain plus reflection equals progress is an amazing thing. Really thinking about something and assessing where you are and knowing that you're not where you want to be or that you're not happy. Man, that sucks to do that. It really, really sucks. It sucks to admit that you're not happy. It sucks to admit that and that is a painful experience. But if you don't reflect on it, then there can't be any progress. And if you don't go through that pain of really knowing where you are, then you can't reflect on it as deeply.
What's the difference between reflection and dwelling on your shortcomings?
Reflection is non-judgmental. Dwelling on your shortcomings, I think, well, you just said it right there, shortcomings, there's some judgment in that this that this is bad, that that you're not who you're supposed to be. Reflection, I think, is all right, this is where I am, this is who I am, it might not be where I want to be, but let's make steps to change it. And it's the lack of beating yourself up about it. Dwelling on your shortcomings, again, I think implies some sort of negativity, like playing the judge and the victim versus reflection, which is much more non-judgmental in terms of assessing things as good or bad versus just like this isn't where I would want to be, ideally speaking.
I like that. I like that. Okay, let's move on. The fun one. Name the agreements which rule our lives. I don't think we need to spend as much time here because, I mean, what everything we've as an adult, everything you see on Instagram, everything you see on Facebook, everything you see whoever you look up to say and do, everything that makes you feel good in the short term, we subconsciously agree to that, and then also more powerfully, everything your parent ever taught you, everything your religious leader ever taught you, everything your teacher ever taught you, everything your friend group ever taught you, how to be cool, how to be acceptable, how to be a part of the group. Like, man, we're not going to let you hang out if you act like that, you know?
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, I guess we could leave it at everything, but like, what are your thoughts? Like, is there anything that specifically comes to mind?
So I talked about it a lot in a professional capacity earlier, and I think particularly for high achievers, it's like very hard to not fall into like trying to attain some image of like, this is what a so-and-so looks like. This is what a stockbroker. I don't even know if people are stockbrokers anymore. Like, this is what a college basketball coach looks like. And like inherently I went into I agreed to everything about that image that I created, and that like affected so much more than my professional life. It affected my personal life. Oh, a successful so-and-so like goes into the office on the weekends and all they do is work, and they're not nice to people, and they're on their phone all the time. And now, I feel the need to be like on Twitter and texting around friends, and just, it affects like so much more. Even if it's something that's just in a personal, professional capacity, it affects like so much, affects all the areas of our life, or of our lives. But, I think that question, name the agreements which rule our lives, like that question or that statement was born out of my favorite, might be my favorite passage from the book. If we can see it as our agreements which rule our life, and we don't like the dream of our life, we need to change the agreements. And when I read that back in January or February, when I was trying to figure out what were my next steps and what I was doing, and how I wanted to implement these things I was thinking about, like that quote was really powerful for me. If we can see it is our agreements which rule our life, and we don't like the dream of our life, we need to change the agreements. And all of a sudden I read that, and it's like, all right, like I need, like these are the agreements that are in my life, like I need to change that. All of a sudden the image of a successful college basketball coach like isn't someone who's clean shaven. Like, I grew out my beard, and like it's just something as simple as that. Like, I started being like myself more around our players and developing our relationships better. I didn't have to like grind them into the ground in a workout, and I could like meet them where they're at and develop a skill and have them feel really good about themselves, so that our freshman point guard could hit big shots like in a close game. And it changed like everything about like who I coached, and also like how I interacted with others. And so it's name the agreements which rule our lives. Like that statement is like, it was born out of that quote, and it's twofold. Again, it comes back to defining the terms. We have to know like what agreements are in our lives currently in order to like then understand them and move past them, so that we can affect change and get to be where we want to be and the people that we want to be.
No, absolutely. I think you summed that up. Last question. Biggest question. This might be the biggest question of the book. I think it's going to be hard-pressed to beat this question. What would it look like if we defined our freedom?
I mean, like, it's an amazing question. What would it look like if we defined our freedom? Like, that's that's the essence of this book right here. It's going to be different for everybody. I know that our freedom is different for everybody. I think that you dive into that accessibility of happiness and love when you start to define your own freedom. And like, I love that statement at the beginning of the book, accessibility of happiness and love. Again, like, I don't know what everybody's freedom is going to look like for them. Like, for me, it does involve like making breakfast tacos every morning, right? Like, that's a form of personal freedom for me. But I think in general, it's approaching life like with a sense of wonderment, with accessibility, of happiness and love.
So, two things kept coming to mind. Really reading this whole book, but then especially when I read that question on the guide. First of all, it reminds me of how great the movie The Matrix was.
Okay.
The Matrix is the dream.
Yeah.
You're plugged into the Matrix.
Yeah.
You think it's real. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's concocted.
For sure.
It's things we've accepted as true that are not in fact true. But even within that, you have a choice.
Yeah.
Because you could also just go on living. Hey, you know what, everybody listening? You don't have to change anything.
Yeah.
You can keep living by the agreements that you currently hold. Keep gossiping. Keep doing all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be seen in society as being normal. And ultimately, life is nothing short of a video game. So who's to say if you're playing it right or wrong?
Yeah.
Gets
And you might be extremely successful at doing it as well.
Absolutely. And you get to the end of the game. And I mean, you already touched on it. You know, if you're unhappy with where you're at, that's when you need to change. But if you're not unhappy, keep being mediocre. That's fine. I don't mean that. I mean, actually, I do mean that. But, like, it's okay to be mediocre. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to not want more because there's millions of people that don't want more.
Yeah.
And the Matrix is about that. It's about, do you want to take the pill? It's your choice. Take the blue pill. We're going to get crazy. Take the red pill. You go back to, might be the opposite. Maybe blue pill takes you back to the Matrix, whatever. And you have to make that choice. And then what does it mean? What does it look like if we define our freedom? It's the last scene of the Matrix, which was silly at the time, where he flies.
Mm-hmm.
He literally just takes off.
Yeah.
And if that's too silly, because I thought it was silly when it happened. And if you haven't seen The Matrix, you young kids, you need to watch it. I think it still stands as a rewatchable movie, meaning, yeah, the shots aren't as artistic as they once were, but they were groundbreaking at the time.
For sure.
We're getting into a different discussion there. But if it's not, fine, it's not The Fly. Let's not say flying. The end where, what were the guys, Mr. Smith? Like, all the Mr. Smiths attack him, and he's just fending them off with one arm, and he finally just, like, energy blasts everybody because he now has full control. Because in the Matrix, and I think that's what's, like, what excites me, why we're in this business, like, right now, like, I'm getting those vibrations in my skin, my hair standing up on end, because what excites me about what we do here is that there's always the potential that today is the day someone finds that new hope, and they are unfucking stoppable when they find that hope.
Yeah.
When they realize they are not held back by their husband, by their wife, by their job, by their life, by their kids, by their parents, when they realize they are in full control and they can do whatever the hell they want to in this life, and most importantly, find personal freedom. Like, there's no greater thing than that. And The Matrix was about that. Because then once you tap into personal freedom, you get to come back into the dream, into the Matrix, and you get to wreck shop. You get to live life however the hell you want to. And hopefully that is in empowering other people and helping lead them to feel fulfilled and feel happy, like true happiness, and to limit expectation and to question the agreements and not just operate in blind faith. But that's what the Matrix was. That's the entire story, was that quit accepting things at surface value and understand to get to your true self. You can then go through pain. The whole climax is him having to relearn life, and I mean literally relearn how to walk. He doesn't have muscle because he's been in a pod, and the reality is the only reason he thought he was functioning was because he was functioning by the terms set by society or by the Matrix, by the robots, and now he's had to actually really do it, and it's way harder that way. And then the whole thing is he then surpasses where he once was, because he decides to choose that journey, and it's not without its struggles, it's not without its setbacks, but he continues to push forward. And the moment he defines his own freedom, he can literally fly. He is in full control of what's taking place. And I have this thought. I don't think I've ever asked you. I've asked a few people. And it's heady. Like, it's out there. So, like, try to think about it.
I wouldn't expect anything less from you.
What do you think the limits of human potential are?
Yeah, I mean,
let me first say, like, with CrossFit, like, physically, nothing has explored human potential like CrossFit.
Exactly.
The 2008 games, the clean and jerk was like 135, and they sucked at it.
Yeah.
I could beat Khalipa right now. Like, my 135 clean and jerk was better than Khalipa's in 2008.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that same workout would be done at like 315.
Yeah. I mean, so there was. I think it was like the 2014 like games documentary, which was like 20 minutes long, and it
Yeah.
was like the first one that they kind of put out
Right.
on all this stuff. Like that, I first watched that maybe 2013, 2014, I don't know, but I first watched that when I like was first getting into CrossFit, and it was like this like earth, it was like this really groundbreaking video for me. It's like, oh man, like we don't like what are our limits? Like there is no potential, and like as a as someone who's in athletics, you always talked about like genetic potential, and that just like some people weren't going to be able to do things, and it's like it might take me longer to get to a certain point, and like yeah, obviously like genetics still does play a certain role, but what are
Right.
the limits of human potential? Like I don't know. Like I just know that it's important like not to define them.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you go off and jump and build it. You go and jump off and build
Sure.
it because you're like there are no limits. Like I can fly. Like we have to operate like within some reasonability here. But like I don't. And even if there are limits, like it doesn't benefit us to operate as if there are limits. So what are the limits? Like I don't know. And even if they are, like what good does it operate, or what good does it do you to like walk around believing that like you can't be more than who you currently are?
Right. I guess what would be kind of silly is like, okay, Bible says that faith could move a mountain,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, what? Why don't mountains move then? Like,
Yeah.
certainly somebody's tried to move a mountain. Well, here's the deal: no man has ever had that faith.
Yeah.
No man has stood before the mountain and actually believed that the mountain would move.
I mean, you could also say that like man has moved mountains. Like there are like rivers and wind that like cuts
Sure.
through mountains
Sure.
over long periods of time.
Oh, and I mean,
right?
there's absolutely. But in the why has a man not walked up to Everest and taken Everest from here and put Everest over there?
Yeah.
Well, it's because no man actually believed he could.
Yeah.
No woman ever believed they could. Who's to say that if we develop that faith, that it couldn't happen?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about like the impossible here, right? But like people do the impossible all the time.
For sure.
Okay, and so back to like, there are probably limits, but why are we well served to believe in limits?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we used to believe that a 4-minute mile wasn't possible, and then Bannister broke it, and then suddenly everybody broke it. But
Yeah.
it took him believing he could. Nobody else believed he could. Nobody else believed they could.
Mm-hmm.
But then as soon as he did it, it was like, oh yeah, I could do that. And then everybody did it.
Yeah.
But it took someone to have, for no reason, nobody told him he could. He believed in like he refused to believe there was a limit, kind of thing. And that's what crosses my mind. I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna say I don't think. I don't know if we really truly allowed ourselves to live unbridled, if we wouldn't ourselves turn into some sort of like mutant with like actual power. And I don't know if it's laser beams out of eyeballs, but I do know that like, hey man, isn't it a little weird that if I'm in a bad mood and you're at the back of the gym, you can feel it when I walk out?
Yeah.
What is that? Explain that to me. You can't, because I didn't say anything. You could, like, it's body, whatever you want. You don't know what it is, but I know for people, I can, maybe it's a superpower that I got to figure out. But like, my point is, weird stuff exists that we don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we allowed ourselves to live without limits, I mean, the Bradley Cooper movie, Limitless, he took a pill, but what if it was a placebo? Like, what if it was the shit you can do when you don't, when we have an athlete lifting weights and we don't tell her what's on the bar?
Yeah, it's
guess what
crazy,
she does?
right?
She picks it up.
Right.
And we tell her what's on the bar. Guess what she does? She doesn't pick it up.
Yeah.
Like, hey, quit counting. Oh, I did it. Well, that was 30 pounds heavier than you thought.
Yeah.
Or count. They can't even get to their old PR,
Sure.
because they're aware of the limit that exists in their mind, So that's something that always bounced around my head. Like, what's a human going to be capable of?
Yeah.
Because we're self-limiting to such an egregious, awful degree. Like, we are so like, I can't do that.
Mhm.
I would never be able to do that.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. To answer the question is to say that like we don't know what those limits would be. As soon as we answer the question in terms, like, then all of a sudden you have put limits on what humans are capable, and you've said that humans have limits. So to answer that question properly is to say that like we don't know what that would look like, but it's just to like vow to operate in a way and to live in a way that we don't put limits on ourselves, which is like so hard. It's so much easier said than done, obviously, right?
Sure.
But to answer that question properly, in my opinion, is to say that like we don't know what that would look like. Right. We can't answer that fully.
I think we should add, we can't answer it. However, we ought to be excited to find out.
Absolutely. That's a great way.
Because I'm 1,000%. I don't think we should even try to answer it. Like, I think we should just explore it.
Yep.
You know, but I think because if we were demanding we answer it, we're automatically putting limits. We're automatically seeking agreements that we can make.
Yep.
Being like, okay, well, yeah, it's farther than we thought, but it's only to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can run a 4, but you can't run a 3:30.
Exactly.
Like, well, that was the whole lesson we learned at 4. Like, stop saying that.
Yeah.
Like, eventually someone's going to run a mile at the pace they currently run 100 meters.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. Because how is that not? Every year we get faster.
Yeah.
Every year someone runs something at a pace that was formerly for a shorter distance race, and we're using a track analogy. If you're not in a track, you run 100 faster, you run a 200, you run a 200 faster, you run a 400. Like it just – but, like, look at the 400. It used to be like 50 seconds was awesome, and now it's like 38, 35 – 35 seconds.
Yeah.
That's faster than 4 10-second 100s.
Crazy.
What? Never mind, I can't run 50 meters at their pace.
Right.
Like, so who's to say?
Yeah.
You know, and it's fact. We'll wrap this one up. But, like, Glassman's still in search of the first person to squat 500 pounds and run a 5-minute mile.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only reason it hasn't occurred is because nobody's working on it specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because we're using CrossFit methodology, and CrossFit's great at general preparedness, but I think for something like that, it's got to be like a Tommy Hackenbrook back in his 20s, though. I think he's aged out. But, like, a big man that can move that's like, I'm going to accomplish this thing. Mm-hmm. I think it will happen over time. I think, the 2025 games, if CrossFit sticks with the games, now that we're focused on health, who knows? But the 2025 games, we'll see someone like that, or maybe 2030, like, down the road naturally. But I think it could occur now if someone was, like, specifically like, I'll sacrifice other things, which would be insane. It's already insane that we had women at the games opening their deadlift at 400 pounds. Yeah. It's insane the men were opening squats at 5. Like, all this is insane. We're already past sanity. Like, we're already, as Musk said about the Tesla, the ludicrous mode. We're already in ludicrous mode of life. Like, it is absurd. Mm-hmm. If we were in the 50s looking ahead and be like, this is the performances we will see, mind blown. Yeah. But and maybe that's another great example. So how far we've come, but we don't think we can go farther.
It's a crazy statement, right?
We're like, no, but I know they grew, but this is it for us. Yeah. So we will never evolve from this point. This is where we're stuck. We will no longer continue to change. Man, we've only been changing at a higher rate every year. Yeah. Okay. I think we've rehashed the intro in chapter 1. The second assignment is only chapter 2. We will get to that in the next episode. It will be a much shorter episode. So if you made it all the way through, I appreciate you. We will be back with chapter 2 next. Have a wonderful day.